Have you ever been in a room full of people and felt like you did not quite belong? That quiet, persistent sense that you are operating from a different set of assumptions than everyone around you. That the things you care about most are not the things being celebrated. That you are speaking a slightly different language and hoping nobody notices. Most people feel this at some point. A family gathering where your values sit awkwardly at the table. A workplace where the culture quietly asks you to be someone you are not. A culture that is moving in one direction while everything inside you is pulling towards another. It is one of the most quietly exhausting ways to live, not dramatic suffering, just the constant low-level effort of being somewhere you do not fully belong. There is a letter in the New Testament written specifically for people who feel exactly like that. It was written to people the author calls foreigners and exiles, people scattered across the ancient world, living in places that were not their home, holding on to a faith that made them strangers in their own communities, people who were not being thrown to lions, but who were experiencing the steady, grinding pressure of living differently in a world that noticed and did not always approve. The letter is 1 Peter, and it is one of the most relevant documents in the entire New Testament for people living in the 21st century. Because the feeling it was written to address, of being a stranger, of not quite belonging, of holding on when holding on costs something, has not gone anywhere. Before we get into it, I want to welcome everyone back. And if you're new here, this channel exists to make the Bible simple, clear, and deeply understandable so we can grow in it daily. Feel free to leave a comment. It might encourage someone more than you realize. Now, let's start with the writer of this letter. The letter opens simply. Peter, an apostle of Jesus Christ. Peter, the fisherman from Galilee, one of the first disciples Jesus called, the one who walked on water and then sank, the one who declared, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God," and then, a few chapters later, told Jesus he was wrong about going to the cross, the one who promised he would never abandon Jesus, and then denied knowing him 3 times before sunrise. Peter is one of the most fully human figures in the entire New Testament. He is not a polished religious professional. He is not a trained theologian. He is someone who believed deeply, failed spectacularly, was restored completely, and spent the rest of his life as living evidence that God uses imperfect people. And this matters enormously for how we receive this letter. Because when Peter writes about suffering, when he says, "Do not be surprised at the painful trial you're suffering," he is not writing from a position of comfortable distance. He knows what it costs to follow Jesus. He has stood at a fire in a courtyard and discovered to his own horror that fear can make you deny the person you love most. He has felt the weight of failure so complete that he went back to fishing, back to his old life, back to before any of this started, because he did not know what else to do. And that changes everything about the tone of this letter. Every instruction in it is coming from someone who has personally tested the ground beneath these words and found it solid. Now, who is he writing to? Chapter 1, verse 1. Peter, an apostle of Jesus Christ to God's elect, exiles scattered throughout the provinces of Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, and Bithynia. These are real places: Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, Bithynia. These are regions across what we now call Turkey, and the people living in them are described with 2 words that carry enormous weight: exiles and scattered. The Greek word for exiles here is parapidemos, a word that means someone who is in a place but does not belong to it, a temporary resident, a sojourner, someone passing through. And the word for scattered, diaspora, was a word that every Jewish person in the ancient world would have understood immediately. Because diaspora was the word used to describe the Jewish people living outside of Israel. the ones scattered across the known world by centuries of exile and displacement. Peter is writing to people who have two layers of not belonging. The first layer is physical. Many of them are likely Jewish Christians who have been displaced from Jerusalem. The church had been scattered by persecution following Stephen's martyrdom, described in Acts 8. They are literally living in places that are not their homeland. The second layer is spiritual. Even the ones who are settled physically are now living as foreigners in a different sense, because following Jesus has changed their values, their practices, their relationships, their identity, in ways that make them strangers to the culture around them, the people they grew up with, the communities they were part of, the social world they used to inhabit comfortably. They are strangers twice over. And Peter does not try to solve that. He does not promise it will go away. He does not tell them to assimilate. He does not tell them to hide. He does something more interesting and more difficult. He reframes it. He tells them, chapter 2, verse 11, "Dear friends, I urge you, as foreigners and exiles, to abstain from sinful desires which wage war against your soul." He is saying, your foreignness is not a problem to be solved. It is your identity. It is what you are. And it has always been what God's people have been. Abraham was a stranger in a foreign land. Moses was a stranger in Egypt, and then in Midian. Israel was a stranger in Babylon. The people of God have always been strangers in the world, always passing through, always belonging to somewhere else. This is not an accident, it is a calling. But before Peter gets to the calling, before he gets to how to live as a stranger, he needs to tell them who they are. Because you cannot live well from an identity you have not fully understood. And the first chapter and a half of this letter is almost entirely about identity. Chapter 1, verse 3. Peter launches immediately into one of the most concentrated passages of identity language in the entire New Testament. Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. In His great mercy, He has given us new birth into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, and into an inheritance that can never perish, spoil, or fade. This inheritance is kept in heaven for you. New birth, living hope, inheritance. 3 images. And every one of them is doing specific theological work. New birth. This is not improvement. It is not self-development. It is not spiritual growth from where you already were. It is a new beginning, a new origin. The same language Jesus used with Nicodemus in John 3, you must be born again, born from above, a new entry into existence, which means your deepest identity is not the one you came into the world with. It is the one you were born into through the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Living hope. Peter is deliberate about the word living, because these people are in circumstances that could easily produce a dead hope, a hope that used to be alive but has been slowly extinguished by the weight of difficulty and disappointment. And Peter says, the hope you have is not that kind of hope. It is alive. It has a pulse, because it is anchored not in your circumstances, but in a historical event, the resurrection, that has already happened and cannot be undone. Inheritance. In the ancient world, an inheritance was what you received when you came home. It was what was waiting for you at the end of the journey. And Peter describes this inheritance with 3 words that are doing something very precise in the Greek. It cannot perish. It is immune to death. It cannot spoil. It is immune to moral corruption. It cannot fade. It is immune to time. Everything the world offers as an inheritance, money, status, legacy, reputation, can perish, can spoil, can fade. The inheritance Peter is describing is the only thing in existence that cannot be taken away by any of the forces that take everything else away. And then, verse 5, who through faith are shielded by God's power until the coming of the salvation that is ready to be revealed in the last time. Shielded by God's power. The word shielded in Greek is a military word, phrorumenos, the image of a garrison of soldiers protecting something of great value. These scattered, displaced, pressured people, who feel like strangers, who feel vulnerable, who are experiencing the friction of living differently in a world that doesn't share their values, are being actively guarded by the power of God Himself, not left alone, not abandoned to navigate the strangeness by themselves. This is the identity Peter establishes before he says anything else, before any instruction, before any call to holy living, before any direction about how to handle suffering. He tells them who they are. You are newly born. You have a living hope. You have an imperishable inheritance. You are being guarded. Now, from that foundation, you can receive what he says next. Chapter 1, verse 13. Therefore, with minds that are alert and fully sober, set your hope on the grace to be brought to you when Jesus Christ is revealed at His coming. Therefore, which means, because of everything I just said about your identity, now here is how you live. And the first practical direction is surprising. Set your hope on the grace to come at the return of Christ. Hope, for Peter, is not passive. It is something you set. You direct it. You point it deliberately at the right thing. Because hope pointed at the wrong thing, at circumstances changing, at people approving of you, at life becoming more comfortable, will collapse when those things do not materialize on schedule. Hope set on the grace to be revealed at the coming of Christ. That is a hope that cannot be disappointed, because it is not conditional on anything that can go wrong in the meantime. And then, verse 15. But just as He who called you is holy, so be holy in all you do. This is one of those phrases that has accumulated so much religious baggage over the centuries that it is almost impossible to hear it freshly. For most people, be holy sounds like be religious, or follow the rules, or be better than you currently are. And none of those translations capture what Peter means. The Hebrew root of holiness is kadosh, to be set apart, to be distinct, to be different from everything around it. Holy things in the Old Testament were holy, not just because they were morally superior, but because they were designated for a specific purpose, for a specific person, to belong to a specific context. When Peter says, be holy, he is saying, be distinct, be recognizably different. Live in a way that reflects the values of the world you actually belong to, not the one you are temporarily passing through. And he frames this not as a burden, but as a family resemblance. As He who called you is holy. God is holy. You are His children. Children resemble their parents. This is not a rule imposed from outside. It is the natural expression of who you actually are. And then chapter 2, verse 9. Another remarkable passage in the letter. But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of Him who called you out of darkness into His marvelous light. Now, every one of these phrases is being borrowed from the Old Testament, from Exodus 19, from Deuteronomy 7. These were the words God used to describe Israel, His covenant people, the nation He had chosen and set apart. And Peter is applying every single one of them to this scattered, displaced, marginalized group of people spread across the provinces of Asia Minor. You are the chosen people now. You are the royal priesthood. You are God's special possession. Not because you earned it, not because you are impressive or powerful or socially significant. The people Peter is writing to are largely poor, largely powerless, largely socially marginal. And he tells them, this is what you are. This is the truth about you that exists underneath and above and beyond everything your circumstances are telling you. And then verse 10. Once you were not a people, but now you are the people of God. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. Once you were not, now you are. That is one beautiful reversal. You went from being nobody, from having no identity, no belonging, no people, to being the people of God, not because of anything that was in you, because of the mercy of the one who found you. Now Peter moves into the practical heart of the letter, and this is where it gets specific, because the people he is writing to are not just feeling vaguely out of place. They are experiencing real friction, real pushback, real cost. Chapter 2, verse 12. Live such good lives among the pagans that though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day he visits us. This single verse contains the whole of Peter's social strategy for strangers living in a hostile world. And it is remarkably simple and remarkably hard. Live such good lives. Peter is not saying argue your case or defend your reputation or withdraw from the world into a safe community of people who agree with you. Live such good lives that the accusation doesn't stick. That over time, not immediately, not always, but over time, even the people who are opposed to you are forced to acknowledge that something is different here. Something good is happening here. This is a long game. It requires patience. It requires the kind of character that does not need immediate vindication, and it requires genuine goodness. Not a performance of goodness designed to manage your reputation, but actual goodness that flows from actual character. Then Peter does something that is consistently misunderstood when people read this letter. He calls for submission to government, to masters, to husbands. And the modern reader often reads these passages with alarm. Is Peter endorsing oppressive systems? Is he telling people to just accept injustice quietly? He is not. But understanding what he is doing requires understanding the context. The people Peter is writing to are in a precarious position. They are a minority community, regarded with suspicion by the wider culture, associated in the Roman mind with subversion and antisocial behavior. And Peter's concern, in chapters 2 and 3, is that their behavior should give no legitimate ground for accusation, that the only thing they should be criticized for is their faith, not for actually behaving badly. Chapter 2, verse 15. For it is God's will that by doing good you should silence the ignorant talk of foolish people. Silence ignorant talk. By doing good, not by winning arguments, by living well. And there is something beneath the surface of these submission passages that is more subversive than it looks. Because Peter is not telling these people their oppressors are right. He is telling them that the way they respond to unjust situations is itself a form of witness. That suffering unjustly, with grace, with dignity, without retaliation, is one of the most powerful things a human being can do. And he has the ultimate example. Chapter 2, verses 22 through 23. He committed no sin, and no deceit was found in his mouth. When they hurled their insults at him, he did not retaliate. When he suffered, he made no threats. Instead, he entrusted himself to him who judges justly. This is the foundation of everything Peter is asking these people to do. You can afford not to retaliate because the judge is already on the throne. You can afford not to fight for your own vindication because the one who sees everything, including everything that is being done to you unjustly, will not forget it. This is not passivity. It is not weakness. It is the posture of someone who has genuinely understood that they are not the last word on their own story. More than any other theme in this letter, suffering is the subject Peter returns to again and again. Chapter 4, verse 12. Dear friends, do not be surprised at the fiery ordeal that has come on you to test you, as though something strange were happening to you. This line tells you something important about what some of these people were experiencing. They were surprised. They had become Christians expecting, or at least hoping, that faith would make life better. And instead, life had gotten harder. The faith that was supposed to bring them closer to God seemed to be producing more conflict, more pressure, more loss. And Peter says, this is not strange. This is not an anomaly. This is not evidence that something has gone wrong with your faith or your God. This is what following Jesus looks like in a world that has not yet been made right. And then verse 13. But rejoice inasmuch as you participate in the sufferings of Christ, so that you may be overjoyed when his glory is revealed. Participate in the sufferings of Christ. This phrase is highly demanding, and also one of the most comforting. It is demanding because it frames suffering not as something foreign to Christian experience, but as something inherent to it. And it is comforting because it means your suffering is not random, it is not meaningless, it is not evidence of abandonment, it is participation. You are in something larger than your individual experience, something that connects your suffering to the suffering of Jesus himself, and by extension, to the glory that followed his suffering. Peter does not explain how this works in detail. He does not make the logic fully explicit. He simply asserts it. Your suffering connects you to his suffering. And his suffering led somewhere. It led to resurrection. It led to vindication. It led to glory. Which means yours is not the end of the story either. Chapter 5, verse 10. The most beautiful promise in the entire letter. And the God of all grace, who called you to his eternal glory in Christ, after you have suffered a little while, will himself restore you and make you strong, firm, and steadfast. A little while. In the context of eternity, which is where this letter is always pointed, even a long period of suffering is a little while. Peter is not minimizing what these people are going through. He is placing it in the right frame, the frame of what comes after. Will himself restore you, make you strong, firm, steadfast. 4 verbs. And the subject of all 4 is God himself, not your own effort, not your own discipline, not your own resilience finally paying off. God himself, doing the restoring, doing the strengthening, coming personally to do the work that only he can do. This is the same God who baked bread for Elijah under the juniper tree, who came in a gentle whisper when Elijah had nothing left, who sends an angel to strengthen Jesus in Gethsemane. The God of personal, attending, specific care for people who are running out. He will himself restore you. The letter ends with 2 of the most important instructions Peter gives, and together they form a kind of bookend around everything he has said. The first is chapter 5, verse 7. Cast all your anxiety on him, because he cares for you. We looked at this verse briefly in the anxiety video, but in context, here, at the end of a letter written to people who are displaced, pressured, suffering, confused, wondering if any of this is worth it, it lands with its full weight. Cast all your anxiety on him. The word cast, as we have seen before, is not a gentle word. It is not gently place or carefully hand over. It is to throw, to hurl, to fling it as far away from yourself as you can in the direction of God. And the reason Peter gives, because he cares for you, is doing enormous work. Because these people have every reason to wonder whether God cares. They are displaced. They are suffering. They are being accused of things they did not do. They are watching the unjust prosper and the righteous struggle. And Peter does not answer their circumstances. He does not explain why things are the way they are. He simply asserts the thing that the whole letter has been building toward. He cares for you. The inherited theology, the royal priesthood identity, the living hope, the imperishable inheritance, the promise of restoration. All of it is the evidence of the care. He did not do all of that for a people he is indifferent to. He cares for you. Cast it on him. And then the second bookend, verse 8. Be sober-minded. Be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. This is a startling shift in tone. Immediately after, cast your anxiety on him because he cares for you. There is a warning. Stay alert. Be watchful. And I think Peter puts these two things next to each other very deliberately. Because the temptation for people in this situation, people who are worn down, who are weary, who have been carrying the weight of strangeness and suffering and displacement, is to drop their guard, to stop being spiritually attentive, to go through the motions of faith without the real engagement of faith. Because they are too tired, because they have given so much, because it all feels very far away. And Peter says, this is exactly when you cannot afford to stop paying attention. The enemy is not impressed by how tired you are. The pressure you are under is not a pass on being watchful. The weariness that makes you want to just put it all down and stop thinking so hard, that is precisely the condition the enemy is looking for. Cast your anxiety on God and stay alert, both at the same time. Not instead of each other, both. The casting is not passivity. The watchfulness is not anxiety. Together, they describe the posture of someone who has genuinely handed their fear to God, and therefore has the internal resources to be present and attentive in the world, not consumed by their own worry. So let's bring the whole letter together. Peter's letter to them does something that nothing else in their circumstances could do. It tells them the truth about who they are. You are chosen. You are royal priests. You are God's special possession. You are newly born into a living hope. You have an inheritance that cannot perish or spoil or fade. You are being guarded by the power of God Himself. Your strangeness is not a mistake. It is your identity. The people of God have always been strangers. Abraham was a stranger. Israel was a stranger. And the stranger life, the life that holds to things the world around you does not value, that points toward a home that has not yet fully arrived, that life is the life you were made for. And in the middle of living that life, when it costs something, when the pressure is real, when you are tired and wondering how long, two things are simultaneously true. He cares for you. Cast it on Him. Every piece of it, all the anxiety, all the weight, all the accumulated weariness of living as a stranger in a world that does not share your deepest values. Throw it at God and stay alert. Be present. Be watchful. Because the stranger life is a meaningful life. It is a life pointed toward something real, and it is worth staying in. After you have suffered a little while, and it is a little while, in the light of what is coming, He will Himself restore you, make you strong, firm, steadfast. The God of all grace will not leave the work unfinished. If you know someone who is in that stranger in the world season right now, share this with them. Because sometimes what someone needs most is not an answer. It is to know that someone else understood the question. Subscribe if you haven't, because next up, we are going to go to the book of Job, the Bible's most direct confrontation with suffering. Why does a good God allow pain? Job does not give you a tidy answer. It gives you something far more honest and far more powerful. I'll see you there.